In this segment, we're going to look at Luke chapter 2, verse 43 through 47. So if you would, grab your Bible, grab your mobile device, take a hold of your computer, whatever you're looking at. I'm always working through the King James just because that's my base text, and use whatever version you're working with. But let's start with Luke chapter 2, verse 43. And when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not. So we looked at that particular verse in our previous segment. So if you would, go back to that segment, and you'll see some things held off or presented in that verse. Luke chapter 2, verse 44. And then we're going to read down through verse 46, and then we'll take a look at some things. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey. They sought him among their kinfolk and acquaintance. When they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. A lot of people will spend a lot of time on these verses, but we're going to leave their commentary for what they present. What we want to look at is the context of the Old Testament around Jesus. So take a look that Jesus is at the temple. Now this is about 70 years before the destruction, so that Herodian temple that's been rebuilt is still there and is being used for sacrifices and presentation there. The doctors is what the King James translates. The English Standard Version uses the word teacher, so you could look at the Greek word that sits behind that, and you can get a little bit of a meaning from it from the Greek. But these are men who are going to be teaching Torah. Now that could be Torah as in the 5 books of Moses, also known as the Pentateuch, or it could also mean the Torah as in the Tanakh, which is the Torah, the Nevi'im, Ketuvim, which is an abbreviation for the Hebrew of the law, the prophets, and the writings. That would be the canon of the Hebrew Bible. But there's also one other thing that they could be teaching, and as doctors or teachers, they could be teaching the oral law and the traditions of the sages and the rabbis. So when it sits down and it says that he is in the midst of the doctors, you have to recognize that they are teaching from Moses, they are teaching from the prophets, they are teaching from the writings, so they're teaching from the Bible, and they are teaching from the oral law or the traditions of the elders, these types of things. So it's very important that we see these things. So he is hearing them and asking them questions. Now, what that insinuates is a dialogue. Now, it could also encompass a debate or a mild debate, but either way, what we're finding is that Jesus is listening to what they're saying and then telling them what he thinks. And this becomes very important when you look down into the next verse, because he's asking them questions about why they think what they think. Look at chapter 2, verse 47. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. All that heard him. So the temple complex, Jesus is about 12 when he's here. In that temple complex are lots of people. From the teachers that we saw here in the previous verse, to the people who are the priests, to the people who come up to the temple to offer their sacrifices, to people who are just walking through the complex. This is an amazing event. We don't know who the all was, but there was a bunch of people there who heard that. All that heard him were amazed, astonished at his understanding. So his is Yeshua, Jesus, and his understanding would be his knowledge, his comprehension, his intellect of all things that are in the scriptures, all things that are taught as tradition, and the clarity that comes out from those scriptures. And then they are also astonished or amazed at his answers. So his responses to their dialogue, to their queries, to the interaction that they were having together, they are amazed at these things. Jesus is amazing, but he is completely within the Old Testament, for the New Testament has yet to be, because in our previous segment we saw that the New Covenant comes in with the death of a testator, which is written about in the book of Hebrews. So this is important. Jesus is a young man. He's about 12. He has not even begun his ministry. And people are astounded at his comprehension at this point in his life. So it stands to no real surprised that when he starts his ministry, he really has the ability to have people sit up and take notice of what he is doing. And this is very profound when you recognize that he is teaching all of this from the Hebrew Scriptures, which we call the Old Testament.